Since everyone has been riding the wave of Garling slander, a little while ago I made a poll on who would win in a fight, the blind swordsman and admiral of the Marines, Fujitora, or the champion of God's Valley, Saint Fingerling Garling.
Get this bum out of here, will you? Just get this bum out of here already, huh?
Shout out to the homie Verdicts for suggesting this matchup to me to begin with, because this is actually an amazing idea. I made a whole video breaking down Fujitora's character a while ago, which you should definitely check out, but to make a long story short, Fujitora literally hates the world government. He is easily one of the biggest ops to their reign by leaps and bounds. If Greenbow wasn't at the referee, my goat would have caught so many Celestial Dragon bodies. Fujitora pulls his punches if he thinks you're a good person, so needless to say, he has no reason to hold back in a matchup like this when he was literally about to drop a meteor at Mary Joa. And the more I started thinking about it, I just told myself, screw Jess Garling, throw all the knights in there. I'm not even joking. I'm gonna prove why my GOAT can unironically stomp all these guys. Let's go ahead and lay out the rules for this matchup. So the rules for this matchup are extremely straightforward and shouldn't be hard to follow. Just like always for my versus battle videos, we are using all canon information up to the latest chapter, which is chapter 1162 at the time of recording. Rule number 1, we're using all the Holy Knights except for Elder Garling and Shamrock. The reason should be obvious. Now that Garling is the newest member of the Gurusei, he likely has new abilities and a transformation from Emu we haven't seen yet, so there's no way to tell how strong he is right at this moment. And Shamrock, in terms of showings, doesn't really have anything yet, but he's clearly gonna have more later. We'll have to wait and see. I think I would be disingenuous if I used anything against him right now. Rule number 2, we're using all the God Knights, but for Summers and Garling, we're using their forms from God's Valley. It's likely they were closer to their primes around this time, considering retired Gabon was able to low diff Summers. Granted, younger Ray was able to do the exact same thing to him, but old fighters in One Piece multiple times have shown that they don't have full access to their prime strength anymore. So all the Nameless Knights, plus Maffy, plus Somers, plus Gunko, plus Killingham, and obviously plus Garling. And rule 3, it's just the Knights versus Fujitora on a random island. No outside interference, meaning Emu is not going to save these guys via possession of Gunko. That's literally Emu's powers, not hers. That also means no random demons spawning on the island for backup, but we are giving them their regen. Like I said, pretty straightforward. So let's move on to the scaling of the Knights before we jump into the battle. So when looking at the God Knights, I gotta say, it's pretty disappointing all things considered. Not even trying to be funny, I don't have to downplay these guys because they are literally that bad. Outside of their regen, they aren't really comparable to the bigger threats we've seen in the story. I'm not gonna waste my time trying to decipher how strong the Nameless Knights are. We all know they scale below the strongest Knights, that being Somers, Gunko, and Garling. Maffy is literally just fodder. She has a mouth beam that couldn't kill Marine Dragon, who clearly is not the man he is now. Navy Dragon has more in common with random foot soldier Marines than higher level fighters like Vice Admirals and Admirals. And she literally got no diff by a random slash from Whitebeard where he wasn't even paying attention to her. If she didn't have the regen, she'd literally be dead. Killingham is also kind of fodder too. Without having access to people's nightmares, he's going to be unable to spawn his nightmare sleep tids. Also, not only was Saul, a retired ex-Vice Admiral of the Navy, able to put down one of these creatures, but there's also a time limit as stated by Killingham himself. He could knock out his fellow Holy Knights for a second to possibly spawn an item that could help them, but he hasn't displayed the strength of this ability in a fight. He can make his enemies weaken with his sleep powers, which is actually a decent overall ability. Somers is next, and all of his best showings are literally just him beating on people objectively weaker than him. He got no diff by younger Ray with 0 difficulty. I can't put him in those top tier ranges with what we have so far. As far as his thorn powers go, it's really not anything special in the grand scheme of One Piece. He does have a finite range of how far his powers can reach, so that's something to consider. Next is Gunko, and she actually has solid feats. Her arrow powers are actually really versatile, allowing her to redirect enemy attacks, which allowed her to defeat Usopp, Nami, Brook, and even Jinbei, and adding more force into her strikes, as we've seen her do against Chain Down Loki. When up against Old Man Gabon though, she immediately resorted to using the children as hostages, and immediately took advantage of Colin being Gabon's son. Gabon was confident he could take out Gunko if it wasn't for him seeing into the future and watching his son die in front of him. Gunko didn't really do anything substantial during the God's Valley flashback outside of killing innocent non-fighters. And finally, we have Garling himself. It's pretty obvious that Garling is the strongest Holy Knight. He's held in a higher regard than Gunko, even though we're using his younger self. The fact that he's become the Supreme Commander while Shamrock is just the regular commander, but Gunko is still subservient to him should show her overall power isn't surpassing these two. A lot of Garling defenders tried to soften the blow of him being defeated by Rox by bringing up that Rox is the top dog of the old generation, but we already have confirmation that there's at least 2 other people on Rox's level, that being Roger and Garp, who are literally confirmed by the narrator to be in the same ballpark. Also, Garling literally had another Holy Knight with him when they went to attack Rox, plus 5 Davy Clan members turned into demons, so this was a 7v1 battle, with Garling's side having the ability to regenerate, and they still lost badly just to be Rox's warm-up fight before he takes on Emu. He may be stronger than Gunko and Summers, but his performance makes it genuinely hard to put him in those top tier ranges. Until further notice, I'm giving Garling the unofficial fan rank of YC+, which is overall stronger than the average first commander levels of characters. But that's it. So now that we covered all that, let's go into the battle and how I'm going to prove that Fujitora is taking all these guys to the cleaners. So now we're jumping into the battle, I need to emphasize how underrated Fujitora is in the story. First of all, we have to remember that Admiral candidates are canon in the world of One Piece as shown in SBS 98, meaning there were already people in the Marines considered as potential replacements under Akainu's regime of the Navy to fill in for the 2 empty spots of Admiral, after Kusan's departure from the Marines and Akainu's promotion to Fleet Admiral. And yet Fujitora was automatically put into that position after the draft occurred, meaning bare minimum relativity to the other admirals in the story as a benchmark. And then obviously there's the absurd strength of his gravity powers. I think people do not understand just how cracked this man is. Again, I talked about it in my Fujitora video breaking down his character, but not a single time on Dressrosa did Fujitora go all out. If there was a reward for sandbagging, Fujitora 1,000,000,000% deserves it. It's made very clear at multiple points during the arc that Fujitora did not want the Navy to save the country purposely so that the world government wouldn't sweep the injustice under the rug. Why is this important? Because the brief snippet that we've seen from this man is actually insane. He's able to adjust the level of strength when he increases the gravity down on his targets to insane levels, from just slamming his targets down into the earth, or enough to the point where it can just pin down characters to restrain them. He's able to launch concussive force out via his gravity, and obviously we can't forget his biggest claim to fame, his ability to drop meteors out of the sky. And you know, that's all fine and dandy and all, but I'm sure some of you are probably wondering how all that helps him against people who can easily regenerate from attacks that aren't laced with advanced Conqueror's Haki. It's really simple. Although they can regenerate from lethal attacks, that doesn't mean that non-lethal attacks can't be effective. Let me explain. They cannot touch him. None of these guys have any feats that reasonably make him a threat to Fujitora. Individually, none of their on-screen abilities are an issue. At best, killing him's status ability of making people drowsy and sluggish would be amazing if we were dealing with a relative or weaker opponent, such as the weaker Elbaf Giants, but we already know that abilities can be flat out negated if you have better Haki. Fujitora is relative to the other admirals. That is not a debate. It is a fact shown in SBS 98. According to Jinbei and Fishman Island, the Navy has grown more powerful than it was in the past after the draft. It makes no sense why they wouldn't have somebody on that level to fill in for the loss of 2 admiral positions. It's literally stated that all vice admirals and up have Haki in chapter 594. Would it make sense to appoint people with bad Haki to sufficiently fill in the positions of Aokiji and Akainu when they are literally looking for strong people to recruit during the draft? No, it would not. And the other factor is a stat that usually gets overlooked in versus battle discussions. Range. The extent at which one can use their abilities is incredibly important in a fight. In Elbaf right now, if Robin successfully was able to push Summers out of the area, he literally admits his powers wouldn't work anymore against the child hostages and the adult giants. There are multiple great examples of range in the story, such as Aokiji's literal first feat in the story being him freezing the ocean past the horizon, Kaido lifting up the entirety of Onigashima and carrying it almost to the capital of Wano, Shanks with his far-reaching Haki, as well as Joy Boy's Haki nuke explosion during Egghead. And yet Fujitora, in terms of range, exceeds all of their feats by a significant margin due to literally grabbing meteors with pinpoint accuracy in outer space and hurling them down to Earth. We quite literally see him casually lift up all the rubble in Dressrosa due to the destruction of Dofi's birdcage. No fatigue or signs of strain whatsoever when he does this. He just leaves all of it hanging in the air before he decides to help Luffy. Him being able to use pinpoint accuracy to grab all the rubble in Dressrosa too is also a great display of observation Haki. Also, a lot of people have this misconception that he's using a great deal of power and energy to perform these feats, but it's not true because he literally drops 3 meteors, not 1, 3 meteors, casually while eating a bowl of ramen. This is genuinely low effort for him. He called the meteor that he dropped on Dofi and Law a little test. So yes, the Holy Knights can regenerate from lethal attacks. That doesn't stop them from being pinned down by the intense gravity Fujitora presses down onto them. Some people are going to want to bring up Dressrosa Zoro and how he's able to resist the gravity Fujitora used on him, but Fujitora literally says he doesn't like the idea of fighting the Straw Hats after they treat him kindly back in the gambling house. Fujitora isn't even fazed when Zoro does this. No sweat marks or a shocked expression, he just calls Zoro slashes Onori after he blocks the attack. This is the same man who could have captured the Straw Hats immediately after Doflamingo was defeated, but decided to drag his feet for days until Sengoku and Suru got on his case about it. He was not going all out. And Fujitora can simply throw these guys into the ocean. Like, he literally chucks Luffy from Dressrosa all the way to the coast where he and his allies are escaping. Killingham and Maffy don't have anything in their arsenal to prevent them from being launched. Somer's wrapping himself around an object with his thorns doesn't matter because Fujitora can just lift anything he's attached to and send that flying too. Gunko with her redirection abilities doesn't matter if Fujitora can just increase the gravity around the entire battlefield. If she gets launched from Fujitora's gravity, she can just use her aeroplane to grab at the bare minimum one other person because it's a two-seater, and it's more than likely going to be Garling since she holds Shamrock in such a high regard with her words. But people forget that Fujitora is one of the few people in the story who can fly via his powers. Even if she can momentarily reorient herself and save Garling while being launched into the air, Fujitora can just pull up to them and slam them down with gravity however many times it takes before they get thrown into the ocean. Killingham, Somers, and Gunko are all Devil Fruit users. We have no idea if Maffy or Garling have fruits yet at the time of recording. The nameless God Knights again don't matter. If they have fruits or if they don't, is it going to change the fact that any of the non-fruit users are stuck flailing in the ocean after Fujitora launched them, while the fruit users are drowning and sinking to the bottom of the sea? For the remaining non-fruit users, they have nothing that they can do here to effectively retaliate against Fujitora himself. Fujitora literally can either slam them down into the ocean in an attempt to drown them, or send them flying even further. It's really that simple. You can't tell me that Fujitora can't do this with his gravity when News Juro, a literal member of the Gurusei, got pushed away by Atlas during Egghead. The only possible thing that they could do to survive is if we assume two things are true. The first is that any of the other knights besides Gunko can perform the Abyss ritual, which we haven't seen yet at the time of recording, and two, that the ritual can be performed on the surface of the ocean since it's only been performed on solid ground every time we've seen it. But even if we assume that these two things are possible and that they do pull off the ritual, all that means is that they ran away and some of their strongest fighters are stuck deep at the ocean floor. They can't do anything. Fujitora is way too versatile. He has shown the ability to lift and manipulate objects way heavier than a group of a dozen or so people and has the range to affect the entire area. Because of his ability to fly, he can easily stay out of their range while they are still well into his. He has shown the ability to use his gravity as a shield as well, so anything that they could launch can be blocked if he doesn't choose to simply dodge out of the way either. Fujitora's abilities hard counter the regen because his attacks don't need to be lethal for it to be effective against them. So yes, Fujitora wins this battle quite easily. I know some people will say I'm downplaying the Knights, but until I see something substantial from them that doesn't involve beating chained down opponents who can't fight back, civilians who either don't fight or are objectively weak fighters, or using meat shields to use against their opponents, I'm not buying the hype. They can't seem to do anything against actual strong characters, and there really isn't a way for them to get around Fujitora's gravity. Meanwhile, Fujitora literally doesn't need to kill them to conventionally win the fight. Thank you everyone for watching and considering subscribing for more videos in the future. I hope you all have a great day and please stay safe. Peace.